Hello, Disney fans. I'm going to be talking today about a Disney movie that gets overlooked a fair bit. Now, it surprised me when I realized how much Hunchback of Notre Dame is overlooked because I remember as a kid when this came out, there was merchandise for this everywhere. I remember going to Barnes and Nobles and they had how many side books that tied in with the movie. Of course, the original Victor Hugo novel was selling big time at that point. But really, when people talk about Disney, they don't talk about Hunchback a lot. And I can understand why to a large extent. This is not what you think of when you think of Disney because it doesn't feel like a Disney movie. It is way more dark, way more adult. And if you've ever read the original novel, you might be wondering what the heck anyone was thinking when they read that and they thought, oh, Disney can make something of this. Disney will be perfect to make this book. Because there's probably not a book out there that's less Disney esque. But as much as I love Disney, one of the things that makes this movie so great is that they do go deep, they do go dark, they do thought provoke. And I love that Disney, of all companies, took a risk on that. Yes, kids watch this, but it's not something that you would probably think is child friendly if you really think about what's going on here. The lessons taught, and again, the source material, as much as Disney differs from that. Now, the obvious lesson in this movie is, of course, looks and goodness are not related. But the lessons in this movie go so much deeper than that. You have Frollo, who is a very religious person who is clearly evil. Religion depicted as evil. I can't think of any other movie that's marketed to kids that deals with that issue, and it is something that's becoming talked about more and more, I think, as you see people who claim to be religious, and it's obvious from their words and actions that they could not be further from what Jesus taught. Now, on that note, I want to say I will probably be saying things in this video that come off as anti Christian. I am not anti Christian. I am anti Christians claiming they follow what Christ preached when they don't. And that is exactly what Frollo represents in here. And that's one of the reasons why he's such a spectacular villain. He's a character that is all too real and all too relevant. Now, I will be talking a lot about the differences between the book and movie. I don't want to make that the entire focus of this video. That could be a 3-hour long video just on its own, and as it is, I'm going to have to break this video into 2 parts. But with all that being said, let's get down to the start of the story. This movie has an awesome opening number. Now, I could do, again, a full-length, half-hour at least video on every song in here, except one, and I'm going to talk about that one in part 2. But with one exception, all of the songs in here are deep, thought-provoking, incredibly well done. Now, this begins with the very wonderful number Bells of Notre Dame, where Clopin tells the story of how Quasimodo came to be in the bell tower in the first place. And it begins with his mother, his father, and another member of the group coming into Paris.
A trap had been laid for the gypsies, and they gazed up in fear and alarm at a figure whose clutches were high up as much as the bells. Such Claude Frollo, the bells of Notre.
Before we go any further, I should probably give a warning that I'm thinking is obvious, but in case it isn't, we're going to be talking about some very dark subjects in this video: genocide, religious corruption, sexual assault. In the book, at least, it's full on assault. Here, it's sexual harassment at minimum. And I would say it could even be called assault. Now, obviously, dark stuff. It's going to be disturbing. Now, that being said, I also want to talk about Frollo a minute here. Like I said, he is an incredible villain. He's a type of villain we don't see very often. Someone who's obsessed with religion, and that is part of why he is evil. His obsession is twisted. He does not follow what religion actually is supposed to be. It's his own twisted version of it, and it's said right out in the movie, he sees corruption everywhere except within. That's a perfect description of him, but now in the book, he starts out a little differently. He doesn't begin as straight up evil. In fact, to start with, he's not that bad of a guy. I don't know if I'd say actually likable by a long stretch, but he did raise his younger brother after their parents died of the plague. He's very loving to his younger brother, and if anything, he overindulges him. Now, I'm going to talk about his brother again very shortly, because that does have an impact on the plot. But now, getting back to the story, to the movie version of the story, Quasimodo's mother takes him and tries to run. And of course, if you've seen the movie, you know how that turns out. This scene is, of course, incredibly tragic. To have a mother die trying to defend her child. Now, from a religious standpoint, Frollo made a huge mistake, a very serious sin. Not only is he responsible for a death, he's responsible for a death on the steps of a church from someone trying to claim sanctuary. Now, you gotta understand something about sanctuary laws at that time. It was believed if you were inside the church, you were claiming the protection of God. To claim sanctuary was to say, I am under God's protection here. And for someone to go against that, they are going against God's will to protect that person. They are saying, to heck with what God wants. I'm doing what I want. Obviously not good. Now, to make this even worse, Frollo is about to drown baby Quasimodo when she sees that the baby is deformed. Now, of course, Quasimodo's mother didn't give her life for nothing. We see the archdeacon show up, and a lot of people suspect, and they're probably right, that it was her knocking on the door trying to claim sanctuary that woke him up in the middle of the night, where he came out where he was there in the first place, to tell Frollo, look, what you're doing, you can't do this.
You can lie to yourself and your minions. You can claim that you haven't a qualm, but you never can run from or hide what you've done from the eyes. The very eyes of both worlds.
We see often in the movie that Frollo considers himself a perfect guy. He's perfectly religiously moral. Of course he is. And this is the first time, or it's referred to as the one time in his life of power and control, Frollo felt the twinge of fear for his immortal soul. Now, if you were raised Catholic, or if you've seen it portrayed in popular media, you might be familiar with the sacrament of confession, also known as reconciliation, contrition. There's different names for it, but the basic idea is a person goes to a priest, says, forgive me, Father, I have sinned. This is what I've done that's a sin. The priest says, okay, to make up for that, here's what you do. And depending on the sin And the priest might say this set of prayers, do this good deed for somebody. He's going to prescribe something to counter the sin. This is a major sin, of course, that Verlos committed. He's guilty of a death. He was about to kill a baby. He defied the sanctuary of the church. Major, major sin. And the archdeacon says, to make up for this, you raise this baby. Now, the book version is slightly less evil. At least it's not a selfish intention why Frollo raises Quasimodo. In the book, Quasimodo was actually abandoned. And I hate that because, how can you not love the character of Quasimodo's mother in the movie as little as we see of her? I mean, she dies for her child. Now, in the book, like I said, Quasimodo was actually abandoned. Frollo says to God, okay, God, you know that my younger brother has a wild side. Now, to make up for that, if you will have mercy on my brother's soul, I will raise this child. So at least not a selfish motive there. Now, of course, in the movie and in the book both, Quasimodo is raised in the bell tower. 20 years pass from the time that Frollo finds him. So Quasimodo's grown up despite the way he was raised into a caring young man. And we see that when he's taking care of a baby bird and encourages him to fly. And his only friends are the bells and the gargoyles. Now, unfortunately, the gargoyles, as much as I love them in the movie, they don't get a lot of attention in the book. And there's an interesting debate among fans over, you know, um, are they really able to come alive, or is this all in Quasimodo's head? Interesting debate, and I'll leave that up to the viewer to decide. But of course, he makes friends with three gargoyles, Victor and Hugo, who are of course named after Victor Hugo, who wrote the original novel, and Laverne. Laverne is probably my favorite of the gargoyles. She's very motherly towards Quasimodo. She's the one who really encourages him to get out more, to leave the bell tower and go out to the Festival of Fools.
Life's not a spectator sport. If watching is all you're going to do, then you're going to watch your life go by without you.
Talking about Laverne makes me realize I haven't yet talked about the voice cast. And I'll be talking more about different cast members as the movie goes on, but Laverne is voiced by Mary Wicks. Now, she's been involved with Disney before. She was actually the voice of Freckles in 101 Dalmatians, and oddly enough, she was the visual model for Cruella de Vil. The way she moved and the animators watched her and got ideas for how to animate Cruella from watching her, even though she wasn't the voice actress for Cruella, which I find interesting. This was actually her last role. The movie was actually released after she'd passed away. Now, other than Disney, she has many, many other credits in movie and TV. Now, as a fan of classic TV, I had to point out she made frequent guest appearances in I Love Lucy. Everybody who's ever watched I Love Lucy knows the Candy Factory episode. She was the lady at the candy factory yelling for them to speed up the conveyor belt. She was Sister Mary Lazarus in Sister Act. She's got a lot of movie credits. That's just the surface of her movie credits. Frollo is of course voiced by Tony Jay. Very good British voice actor. He was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company. And this is also not his first time working with Disney. He was also, you might be saying, where have I heard his voice before, if you're a Disney fan? Well, he voiced Shere Khan in the second Jungle Book movie, because in the sequel to the Jungle Book, as well as in Tailspin, he also voiced Shere Khan. I probably recognize his voice best, other than from his role as Frollo, He was the voice of the man who runs the insane asylum in Beauty and the Beast. So this wasn't his first time with Disney either. Quasimodo is voiced by Tom Hulce. Now, I gotta give him kudos for not just his voice acting, but for his singing. And we see just what an incredible singer he is during Out There.
Out there, strolling by the sand, taste the morning out there, like ordinary man.
I wish I could show more of these songs, but even as I'm editing this video, I know I'm probably gonna have to revise this at least 50 times just to get past the copyright rules. But amazing singing in here, great songs, and I think Out There is really underrated as one of the great Disney songs. All of these songs, like I said earlier, with the exception of one. And I'll talk about that in part two, but this movie's got some great music in it, as well as great characters. And we're about to meet Phoebus. Now, we get an establishing character moment right from the start where we see he's the kind of guy who will donate money to street performers. We see him throw in a few coins. It doesn't seem like all that much looking back on it, but it's more than a lot of other people were doing who were just walking past. And of course, this is where Phoebus first notices Esmeralda. A few things here. Now, we see people walking by saying, oh yeah, the gypsies will steal us blind, we can't stop to give them coins. Now, something about that I want to say at this point. The word gypsies is used historically correct here. That would have been the term used at the time. It's what Esmeralda's people would have called themselves. These days, it's a slur. It's about the same as calling an African American the N word. Not cool to use that term. But again, historically speaking, I understand why they used it. To hear Esmeralda's people called Romany, that wouldn't have meant anything to anyone at the time. In fact, in the original book, other than calling her people gypsies, the term Egyptian is actually used a lot because they were thought of as having come from Egypt. A lot of misconceptions. Hugo himself is guilty of using these in the novel, although for the time, I'm sure he did the best with the knowledge he had. It's not like he could Google them and look up what's historic, what is accurate, what is correct for their culture. But yeah, these days, that term is not a term to be used. A few extra things about Phoebus here. In the movie, the only really bad thing that can be said about him is, yeah, he works for Frollo and does eventually turn against him when he finds out what kind of a guy Frollo is. But other than that, the worst that can be said about him is he's a rival for Esmeralda's affections, along with, he's competition for Quasimodo, basically. And yes, we'd all love to see Quasimodo get the girl and get his happiness. But other than that, in the movie, you can't really say Phoebus is a bad guy. Again, this differs from the book. In the book, Phoebus is a scumbag. And I'm going to talk more about that, especially in part 2. But yeah, basically, he was already engaged at this point, and he only looked at Esmeralda for a good time. And she saw him as someone she was honestly in love with. He was the kind of guy to go around breaking hearts, basically. Not a good guy, and he does something truly disgusting more towards the end of the book. And I'll get to that. Like I said, that'll probably be in part 2 when I talk about that. But anyway, yeah, to establish Phoebus in the movie, you can't really dislike him just because he's arrival for Quasimodo. In the book, yeah, he is thoroughly disgusting. Well, in the movie, he meets Esmeralda here, sees her dancing, and runs into some trouble with a couple of guards who think that he has stolen the money she's got as opposed to actually earning it by dancing. And Phoebus helps her out here.
Please, sit. Oh, dear, I'm sorry. Naughty horse. Naughty. He's just impossible. Really, I can't take him anywhere.
As much as I love horses, I gotta say I love the fact that Achilles helps Phoebus out here. And of course, they named the horse Achilles just so they could use the Achilles heel joke when they lead him on later, when Phoebus is leading Achilles with him. So, we get to see what kind of a person Phoebus is, and he's taken to see Frollo, who he will be working for, and Frollo wants Phoebus to exterminate Esmeralda's people. And he makes that point extremely clear where he compares them to a bunch of ants and demonstrates what he wants done.
I believe they have a safe haven within the walls of this very city. A nest, if you will. They call it the Court of Miracles.
What are we going to do about it, sir?
Someone who thinks he's ultimately religious, someone who compares an ethnic group to animals, and someone who lusts after young girls. Trying to think who Frollo reminds me of. Nah, just a feeling, I'm sure. Can't think of anybody to compare him to these days. Well, anyway, Quasimodo has decided he's going to go ahead with sneaking out of the bell tower and enjoy the Feast of Fools. And this is another great musical number, Topsy Turvy, where we see just what the point of this day is. It's basically opposite day, where everybody has fun doing the opposite of what would normally be making fun of people that you're normally supposed to look up to, just going crazy and having fun with it. And actually that was kind of a big thing back then, to be able to have that ability to laugh at someone in authority. And this is a very fun song.
Once a year we throw a party here in town. Once a year we turn all parties upside down. Every man's a king and every king's a clown. Once again it's topsy-turvy day.
This song is just so upbeat. How can you not get caught up in it? It's just so much fun. And that's the whole point of the day, of course, to have fun. Well, Quasimodo's worried about getting caught out. He's worried about how people will react to his appearance. Clopin seems to lock onto him and be following him. Just, it's never explained why. But Quasimodo ends up literally stumbling into Esmeralda's tent. And that's how they meet, and he doesn't realize at first that that's his actual face. Now, even though she doesn't know that's what he really looks like yet, it must mean the world to Quasimodo to have someone react with genuine kindness to him for once.
Are you alright?
I didn't mean to. I'm sorry.
Well, you're not hurt, are you? Here, let's see.
No!
There.
Esmeralda is, of course, voiced by Demi Moore. And again, I can't say enough about the voice casting here. They were all amazing. I find it interesting. Now, we see Esmeralda dancing here. And of course, that's how she earns money. People throw her coins to watch her dance. I find it very interesting that she's dressed in red. Because red in Romany culture is bad luck. Big time. Now, of course, it's Topsy-Turvy Day, which might explain her wearing red. Also, red is the traditional color of ladies of the evening. They're clearly portraying Esmeralda in a sexualized light here, something that doesn't go unnoticed by either Frollo or Phoebus.
Look at that disgusting display. Yes, sir.
Now, of course, up next is one of the most famous parts of the story. Quasimodo getting crowned the King of Fools, which, oddly enough, is Pope of Fools in the original book. I guess they didn't want to use Pope and Fools together for this. And King of Fools does it has more of the same connotation for a modern audience than Pope of Fools would anyway, so I can understand why Disney made that choice. But now all of the people are up there wearing masks and they take the mask off, make an ugly face, and Esmeralda's the one to unmask each of them, and of course when she reaches Quasimodo, this is when she learns that's his face. Now it seems like a frightened, angry mob is about to form, but Clopin helps, kind of. He defuses the situation, but at the same time insults Quasimodo. But it is better than an angry mob, I suppose.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't panic. We asked for the ugliest face in Paris, and here he is! Quasimodo!
In spite of the so-called honor of having the ugliest face in all of Paris, Quasimodo is actually enjoying himself. There's actually a moment where he has tears of happiness running down his face. This is as close to kindness as he's ever had. And if you've seen the movie, you know it's about to go downhill real quick.
You think he's ugly now? What's this?
This scene is so painful to watch. To see Quasimodo treated that way, tied down, having things thrown at him, spun around like that in a way that would be sickening. He's being tortured. But it's much worse in the book. In the book, he's actually being whipped. But here's where things are darker in the book. You remember when Phoebus saved Esmeralda from those two guards? Okay, it's worse than that in the book. It wasn't a couple of guards that were giving her trouble. Frollo had ordered Quasimodo to bring Esmeralda to him. You can guess the reasons why. Quasimodo was caught. It was Phoebus who saved Esmeralda for the moment, and Quasimodo was given the punishment for this. Now here's another detail that the movie changes. In the books, in the book, Quasimodo was deaf from the ringing of the bells. He couldn't understand completely what was happening because he had no way to communicate with anyone else. He couldn't hear, or at least not very well. The books say that there are some tones, some pitches that he can hear, but it's extremely limited. For all practical purposes, he is completely deaf. So he had a very limited understanding of what he was being accused of, what he'd been asked to do. Now, that's one thing. If Disney ever does make a live action remake of this, I think it would be wonderful if they included that detail from the story. I get an animation drawing the sign language might be a little difficult, but you're drawing people moving anyway, so I mean, I get why they didn't do it for here, and they gotta have the music, which is of course part of any Disney movie, but they could have done that as internal thinking rather than actually him singing it. So they could have done that. And if they ever remake it live action, I really hope that they include that detail, and please it would be great if they actually hired a deaf actor to play him. It's been done in the stage version, so it is absolutely doable. There's no reason why not. But anyway, Quasimodo was sentenced to be whipped because of what happened with Esmeralda. Now, here, of course, there is no justification at all for him being treated that way. And he begs for Frollo to help him. Frollo won't. Even Phoebus tries to step in. But Phoebus is still at that don't question orders point so far.
Sir, request permission to stop this course.
In a moment.
In the book, after being whipped, Quasimodo is left tied up for a while and he is desperately thirsty. Esmeralda brings him water, even after he tried to bring her to Frollo. She is incredibly kind. But now, as great as Esmeralda is in the book, she's a much, much stronger person in the movie. She knows this is injustice, and she goes to free Quasimodo. And not only does she go to free him, she actually takes a stand against Frollo. She is not afraid to speak up against injustice. And that is why she is one of my all-time favorite Disney characters.
You mistreat this poor boy the same way you mistreat my people. You speak of justice, yet you are cruel to those most in need of your help.
Silence!
Justice!
Now, Frollo, of course, orders his guards to arrest Esmeralda for this. He's not going to stand for her speaking up to him. Esmeralda escapes, and later on, she makes her way into Notre Dame Cathedral. Phoebus comes in after her, not to arrest her, but because he wants to get to know her. Of course, Esmeralda misunderstands this, and they end up having a fight, which you gotta be impressed by Esmeralda here. How can you not be?
You fight almost as well as a man.
Funny, I was going to say the same thing about you.
Once Esmeralda realizes Phoebus isn't there to arrest her, they start to talk, they introduce themselves, begin to get to know each other. That's when Frollo comes in, thinking that Phoebus is arresting Esmeralda, which Esmeralda thinks at first too that she's been tricked. But Phoebus tells Frollo that Esmeralda's claimed sanctuary. It's the only thing he can think of that will keep Esmeralda from being arrested then and there. Frollo still hasn't learned you don't break the sanctuary rule. You just don't. It's to defy God to do that. Luckily, again, the Archdeacon steps in.
Claim sanctuary. There's nothing I can do.
Then drag her outside and...
Frodo, you will not touch her.
Don't worry. Minister Frodo learned years ago to respect the sanctity of the church.
I can't believe I almost forgot to say that the Archdeacon is voiced by David Ogden Stiers. He's a voice that's going to be familiar to any Disney fan. He was, of course, the narrator and Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast. He was Jumba Kiba in Lilo and Stitch. I'm trying to think of what... He was both Ratcliffe and Wiggins in Pocahontas. He had a role in Jungle to Jungle, very familiar to Disney fans. Great voice actor who sadly we've lost in the past few weeks. He passed away a few years ago. Great, talented actor. Again, the whole cast is amazing. I can't say that enough. Now, Frollo doesn't dare challenge the Archdeacon yet, but he does hide out of view until Esmeralda walks past and he grabs her. Now, this is a moment that's going to go over a lot of kids' heads, but as an adult watching this, you fully get what's going on. It is straight up sexual harassment. There is no other way to say it. Disney is dealing with sexual harassment in a movie, and it's dark and it's twisted, and it is as bad as you would think it should be. And I am amazed that they put this in a movie aimed at younger viewers. But again, this is something that a younger viewer is not going to get, but the idea is very clear to any adult watching this.
What are you doing?
I was just imagining a rope around that beautiful neck.
I know what you were imagining.
Esmeralda is safe, but of course she's still very angry over all that's happened. She asked the Archdeacon, what does Esmeralda have against people who are different anyway? And that message continues to resonate. And that's one of the reasons this movie is so relevant. People who are different are still persecuted today, whether it's because of their religion, their ethnicity, because of who they love, any other stupid reason that someone can name. And yes, hating someone for being different is always stupid. It still tragically happens as much today as it did in 1482 when the story is set. The Archdeacon, when Esmeralda says nobody out there is going to help take a stand against this, the Archdeacon says maybe there's someone in here who can. Meaning, of course, Jesus, God, Mary. Notre Dame is French for Our Lady. The cathedral is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and it's her that Esmeralda chooses to pray to. And this gives us one of the most beautiful Disney songs of all time. And this is the way that it amazes me how Esmeralda relates to Mary. She relates to her as someone who's a fellow outcast, which, if you think about it, as a woman in Jewish times who would have been accused of being pregnant ahead of time, Mary would have been seen as an outcast. And I find that amazing that connection is made.
Yes, I know I'm just an outcast. I shouldn't speak to you. Still, I see your face and wonder, were you once an outcast too?
This whole song is, of course, a prayer. Now, one thing, I don't know how many people are aware of this. The Romani people have, most of them have converted to Christianity in more modern times. At this point, their faith was a mixture of a lot of other faiths picked up from their travels, with its roots primarily in Hinduism. It is outright stated in the book, Esmeralda is not Christian. And yet we see all these other people come into Notre Dame to make prayers that are selfish. I ask for wealth, I ask for fame, I ask for glory to sign on my name, I ask for love I can possess. All selfish prayers. And yet the non-Christian in the cathedral makes the kind of prayer the Christians are taught that they should.
Please help my people, the poor and downtrodden. I thought we all were the children of God.
That's sadly something that, like I said, I'm going to come off at points as sounding anti-Christian. I am not. But too many people who call themselves Christian do like Frollo does, and they use religion as an excuse to be against someone else. Esmeralda, who is non-Christian, gets it that we are all the children of God. All of us. And I find that flabbergasting to have that moment in there. That's one of the details that makes this such a great song. Now, Esmeralda tries to apologize to Quasimodo for pulling him up on the stage. She didn't know what it would lead to. And she's amazed at the things she's made. They start to get to know each other better, and he introduces her to the bells. I find, it's just a little detail, but I love those little details. To me, they're one of the things that make a great story. And the names that Quasimodo gives for the bells, they are actually called that in real life.
That's little Sophia. And Jean Marie, Anne Marie, Louise Marie. Triplets, you know.
And who's this?
Big Marie.
Quasimodo shows Esmeralda all around the cathedral, and of course she loves it. It's a beautiful place. It's got a great view, stunning statues, amazing glass windows, just gorgeous. But she can't stay there forever. Technically speaking, she could. She has sanctuary. But, as Frollo said, her people don't do well inside stone walls. She's used to a life of freedom. Quasimodo, though, thinks, well, it'd be different for her because she's different from the rest of her people.
But you're not like other gypsies. They are evil.
Who told you that?
My master, Frollo. He raised me.
Esmeralda is quick to challenge that line of thinking. Not in a confrontational way. She knows Quasimodo is coming from a place of ignorance rather than hatred. He's been raised thinking this about her people. Now, the best way sometimes to point out that you're wrong about a group of people is to point out that you're wrong about one of those people from that group. That can be a building block to change that whole way of thinking. Esmeralda reads Quasimodo's palm and points out there's no monster lines. He's not a monster the way Frollo taught him that he is. And then she knows Quasimodo can't read palms, but he does know her already, or at least he started to get to know her. And she uses that to help change his thinking.
What?
I don't see any.
Any what?
Monster lines. Not a single one. Now you look at me. Do you think I'm evil?
No. No, you are kind and good and
I'm a gypsy.
Quasimodo realizes Esmeralda's not going to be happy being stuck in the cathedral forever, and he helps get her out. He has felt love for the first time. The next song that comes up, it's brief, and it's all too often seen as just an introduction to Hellfire. But it's a great song on its own too, brief as it is. He sings about how he's always seen pairs of lovers down below and they had a glow that felt like heaven's light. And now, for the first time, he wonders if he might have a chance at feeling that.
you I'd never know that warm and loving glow, though I might wish with all my mind.
It is so hard to keep these clips short, but I know for copyright reasons I have to. Now, as I said, Heaven's Light is so often seen as just the lead in to Hellfire. Because Hellfire is, of course, a longer number, it's more of a focal point. But now I see God Help the Outcast as the forerunner to Hellfire. And let me explain why. Yes, Heaven's Light comes just before it. And yes, Heaven's Light, Hellfire, obvious opposites. Obviously, they counter each other. But now, both God Help the Outcast and Hellfire are prayers. Prayers given by two very different people. Now, this is straight up done in reference to a biblical parable that Jesus gave. It's the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. Now, if you're not familiar with it, the basic idea is a Pharisee comes into church and basically says, "Thank you, God, I'm perfect." Almost exactly the way Frollo starts his prayer.
Beata Maria, you know I am a righteous man. Of my virtue I am justly proud.
Now, in the parable I was talking about, the tax collector comes in and prays alongside the Pharisee. Now, tax collectors in Jesus' time were considered among the lowest and the worst of sinners. They were little better than thieves because they would say, "Oh, you owe this much for taxes," when you really didn't. Now, the tax collector comes in the parable and says, "God have pity on me for being a sinner." Now, think back to Esmeralda and God help the outcast. She begins her prayer, "I don't know if you'd even listen to me because of who I am." The reference to the parable is subtle, but it conveys the message perfectly of what the intent is. The parable makes it absolutely clear which one of the two is living the life God wants, and it's not the Pharisee. So that's why I consider hellfire and God help the outcast to be opposite sides, to be parallels of each other. One, the way a prayer should be, the other, a selfish, corrupted prayer. He begins by saying how great he is, and then says, "Well, then help me understand because I'm so great why I'm feeling desire for Esmeralda." Now, for time's sake, I can't cover every bit of Hellfire here. Great song that it is. It's consistently ranked as the best of the Disney villain songs. But I have talked more in depth about that in another video, and I'll include the link to that. But Frollo immediately goes into, it's not my fault for what I'm feeling. This is Esmeralda's fault. It's the gypsy's fault. It's not my fault if God made the devil stronger than me.
It is the gypsy girl, the witch who set this flame. It's not my fault. If in God's plan, he made the devil so much stronger than a man.
Now, of course, this is a very creepy part of the movie. We don't know for sure what those hooded figures are. Are they demons? Are they the ghost of monks? What are they? What are they there for? Are they there to drag him to hell? Are they there to try to help him redeem himself? What are they? What are they? Why are they there? We aren't sure, but they are creepy. And I love the dialogue here. Frollo's line, "It's not my fault, if in God's plan he made the devil so much stronger than a man." That's a line actually lifted from the original book. Now, they changed a lot to make this movie, and if you've read the book, you know why. But I love that you can see that they did their research. They've done their homework, they've actually read this book. And I gotta say, that is no light task. Now, that line, that's not one that's particularly just out there. It's not an often quoted line from the book. You have to have actually read the book to know it's in there. If you want to sit down and read the book, I wish you luck. I have read it. Now, if you listen to the audiobook, it takes an hour and a half to get to, well, a little bit more than an hour and a half before you actually get to Quasimodo. If you're wondering what comes before that, it's a really bad play being performed. No one pays attention to it. They decide, let's all go to the crowning of the Pope of Fools. That's the beginning of the book. So I give major kudos to someone who read all through that to work lines like that in. And of course, Frollo will not accept any guilt for himself. It's not my fault. It's the gypsy girl who sent this flame. It's the witch. It's God's fault for making the devil stronger than a man. Everyone's to blame but me. Meanwhile, those hooded figures are singing Mea culpa. Now, if you're familiar with Catholic rituals, with the old Catholic Mass in Latin, you know that means my fault. There's part of a Mass where they use, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. My fault, my most serious fault. Obviously, they're pointing out to Frollo, yeah, this is your fault. And it's, like I said, it's creepy, but it is so well done. the way this song is written. I can see why this consistently ranks as one of the greatest Disney villain songs. On just about every list you find on YouTube where they rank the top villain songs, Hellfire is always one or two. Now, as twisted as this prayer is, it does get answered. Now, that might not seem obvious at first, and I didn't catch it myself. I forget if I read this once on on another YouTube video or if it was on TV tropes. But somebody commented Frollo's prayer was answered, just not the way that he intended. He said, destroy Esmeralda or else let her be mine and mine alone. But in one of the few moments where he's actually giving I don't know if you, I guess I'd say a non aggressive prayer would be the best way to say it. He asked for protection from his own desire. So, protect me, Maria. Now he gets that answer when he gets the news that Esmeralda has left the cathedral.
Escaped. Wow, she's nowhere in the cathedral. She's gone. But how? Never mind. Give up, you idiot. I'll find her. I'll find her if I have to burn down all of Paris.
Now you might be wondering, how is that an answer to Frollo's prayer? Well, it's been said that prayers are answered in one of three ways: yes, no, or here's a third option. This is the here you have a third option case. He can't be tempted by Esmeralda if she's not around, right? The temptation is removed. She's gone. She's not anywhere near him at the moment. Now, what are the clues that this is actually the answer to his prayer? This isn't in the music or the lyrics, but it's in the way it's animated. The guy who who brings that news to him, he's backlit, heaven's light. God is saying this is the way, and to make the message even more clear, he's in an open door. Here's your way out of your problem. It's symbolic and again very, very subtle. One thing this movie does so well is using subtleties like that. But Frollo does not see this as the answer to his prayer. Instead, he gets angered, and he's all the more determined that either Esmeralda will be his, or she's not going to be around very long.
Choose me or your fire. Be mine or you will burn.
Disney made a musical version of this movie. It's actually really good. It blends both the book and their version of the movie. And that play ends Act 1 shortly after Hellfire, so I'm thinking this is a good point to end Part 1 of my review. Sorry about the change in lighting. You're probably noticing my video got darker, but I was determined to get this video finished today, me being the stubborn person that I am. And with the movie getting to a very dark point, it kind of does seem appropriate after all, so I will be trying to get part 2 up soon, and I look forward to your comments. Let me know what you think of this movie. I know it's unusual for a Disney movie. It seems to be overlooked a lot, like I said, but if you don't like it, that's fine. Everybody likes different things. It happens to be one of my favorite Disney movies. I just happen to consider it extremely well made. In part 2, we will be discussing a lot more with even more comparisons to the book. If you haven't read the book, I don't blame you because it does take forever to get to the events of the actual story. With no offense meant to Victor Hugo. I do respect him as an author, but he's not the greatest at getting to the actual point of the story. So I will see you in my next video, and until then, remember the magic.